heavy spells of rain, especially across parts of Shetland, and this will gradually sink its way southwards. But for the vast majority of Scotland, staying dry into this evening. Likewise for much of Northern Ireland and across much of England as well. We will start seeing some mist and fog patches develop, and across the far south we'll hold on to a bit more cloud through Sunday evening and into the start of Monday. So as we go through Sunday evening and Monday morning, this band of rain across much of northern parts of Scotland will gradually continue to sink its way southwards, perhaps turning a little bit wintry over the hills. Across much of England and Wales, though, we will see a bit more cloud, so it is going to be frost-free out there for most of us, with a strengthening wind coming down from the north later. So as we start Monday morning then, across parts of Scotland, we have this band of rain with a bit of a wintry mix, especially across the hills. That will slowly sink its way southwards into northern parts of England, bring some patchy rain. Elsewhere, generally a cloudier picture. There will be some brighter interludes, but not as mild here. But across the north, that's where it's going to be turning colder, with a brisk northerly wind developing. Bye-bye.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could have £17,777 in tax-free cash to play with this spring. Cash to spend on anything you like. And if that wasn't enough, we're also going to give you not one, but two sought-after designer watches and the latest Mulberry handbag. How would winning that sound? For a chance to win the cash, 2 watches and a designer bag, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie's here with an exclusive opportunity just for you, our incredible GB News viewers. We're giving you the opportunity to win a VIP studio tour right here at GB News HQ. Plus, you'll also get to meet yours truly. It's easy to enter, just head to gbnews.com/community competition and follow the easy steps. Don't miss out, enter now, and I'll see you soon at GB News. Full T's and C's apply.
Good morning. Leo Tolstoy wrote in Anna Karenina, "Spring is the time of plans and projects." I hope, dear viewers, that you plan on being with us here on Sunday with Michael Portillo as we project for you 2 full hours of arts, culture, politics and current affairs. Reform UK has been more popular in some recent opinion polls than either the Labour or Conservative parties. But a party of only 5 members of parliament has split apart, with the party chairman, Zia Yusuf, reporting one of the MPs, Rupert Lowe, to the police for threatening behaviour. Allegations came immediately after Lowe had criticised the leadership of Nigel Farage. Has Reform UK peaked, and may it implode? My panel will opine. President Trump said in the Oval Office this week that Russia's bombing assault of Ukraine is, quote, what anyone else would do. Ukrainian and US officials are set to meet for talks in Saudi Arabia tomorrow. Defence and Foreign Affairs editor of The Telegraph, Con Coughlin, will join me to discuss. The painter of The Singing Butler, Jack Vetriano, died last week. I'll be reflecting on his legacy and work with the art critic Estelle Lovett and asking, as some have suggested, was Vetriano the Donald Trump of painting? And Stefan Kyriazis will be here with us once more. He's been hot-footing it around the West End all week, looking at theatres. But first, your news headlines with Sam Francis.
Michael, thank you very much, and good morning to you. Just coming up to 2 minutes past 11. The top story, underperforming civil servants could be incentivised to leave their jobs under government plans to overhaul the service. Cabinet Office Minister Pat McFadden says it's not match fit for what the country needs and is promising a shake-up where top officials' pay is linked to performance. The government insists it will create a more focused and productive civil service, but unions say it's just a soundbite with no real plan for change. McFadden is expected to outline the reforms next week alongside the Prime Minister's intervention on Thursday. Well, earlier, McFadden joined us here on GB News speaking to Camilla Tominey, and he said the reforms will be radical, but insists it's not about stripping back the state.
What's really important is to get the best value for money for people, make sure these are good jobs that people want to do, and make sure that when we use public resources, it's where the public really want to see it. And that's why we fought the election saying, let's hire more teachers, let's hire more police officers, let's make sure that when taxpayers are paying in, they get a good outcome. That's what we want to see.
Nigel Farage has defended suspending MP Rupert Lowe, warning constant infighting damages political parties. Writing in The Telegraph, the Reform UK leader said that Lowe's public criticism had dented party unity and called it inconceivable to ignore bullying allegations and threats against the party chairman. Claims, though, Lowe strongly denies. Now sitting as an independent, he insists there's zero credible evidence and labels Farage's account an entirely false and poisonous narrative. An independent inquiry is underway as Reform's 5 MPs dropped to just 4 amid those escalating divisions. Lowe claims, though, his suspension followed comments branding Reform a protest party led by the Messiah. And breaking this morning, GB News can confirm that 2,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel in just over a week. That makes up almost half of all arrivals so far this year. Among them, a Palestinian man with alleged extremist links. He's accused of posting anti-Israel hate messages and posting in photos with automatic weapons. The Campaign Against Anti-Semitism says he has ties to a former Hamas leader, but the Home Office won't confirm if he has yet been detained. Well, Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp told us this morning that he thinks Labour has lost control of the UK's borders and vowed that the Tories would crack down on foreign criminals.
What the Home Office needs to do is identify where this despicable individual is and, frankly, remove him from the country back to Palestine immediately. He clearly has no place in the United Kingdom and potentially poses a threat to our fellow citizens. And this just illustrates why it is so important to get control of our borders and to stop these boat crossings. Unfortunately, since the general election, these boat crossings under Labour have gone up by about 28%. And these are the kind of people that Labour are now letting into the country.
A man has been arrested after spending more than 16 hours barefoot on top of Big Ben's clock tower holding a Palestine flag. He scaled the Elizabeth Tower on Saturday morning, finally coming down just after midnight, with police using a cherry picker to bring him down. Video from the scene shows negotiators warning him about an injury to his foot, but he insisted he would only descend on his own terms. The incident has now raised concerns about security, with an MP demanding answers on how the man entered Parliament so easily. All roads in the area have now reopened, and the police say they are working with fire crews to resolve the standoff, or had resolved the standoff safely. And it wouldn't be a news bulletin without a bit of weather for you. So the UK is good news, set for the warmest weekend of the year, with parts of the country hotter than Spain and Italy. Temperatures could hit 20 degrees Celsius in central England on today, while parts of North and Wales reach up to 19 degrees. That is warmer than Marbella, Ibiza and even Sorrento, where highs of just 15 degrees are expected. But I'm sorry to say the mild spell won't be lasting. Temperatures are set to drop from Tuesday, with wintry showers sweeping in. And some rural areas in Scotland could even see lows of -4 degrees. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you just after midday. Now, though, it's over to Michael.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam Francis. In the space of a few days, Reform UK has moved from triumph to disaster. Despite enjoying a lead in several polls over both Labour and Conservative, the party has split. Rupert Lowe, a former chairman of Southampton Football Club, Reform's Member of Parliament for Great Yarmouth until very recently, has had the whip removed, following on from strong criticisms that he had made of the party leader, Nigel Farage. The party's chairman, Zia Yusuf, has denounced him to the police for threatening behaviour, reportedly over an incident that occurred in December. Lowe denies that allegation and others. Has the party imploded? Can Sir Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch now heave a sigh of relief? Should those hoping for an effective policy to control immigration now despair? Joining me is my panel, parliamentary sketch writer at The Telegraph, Madeline Grant, the founder of YOPA and the policy fellow at Onward, Andrew Barclay, and the former Labour advisor, Matthew Lazar. Maddie, first of all, how bad do you think the split is? I mean, it seems to me to be verging on the catastrophic.
I agree. I think that in Rupert Lowe they picked an extremely popular, well-liked, eloquent, and I suppose the word is like impactful Member of Parliament. He was, of all the new intake, he was one of the ones who was making the most contributions, and I think having the biggest impact with his posts, and I don't think that sat very well with the upper echelons of Reform. But it's a terrible look, not just because they have basically torpedoed one of their most capable people, in my view, but it also just suggests, if a party of five is already descending into internecine warfare, then what hope to that one day become a party of government?
And, Andrew, it seems to me a rather nasty way of dealing with this. Instead of saying, you've committed a disciplinary fault here, you've criticised the leader in terms that are not acceptable, what they've actually done is they've accused him of using threatening behaviour. There are allegations around women in his office. Richard Tice was on Camilla a moment ago saying that these events, which have come back to back, that is to say the criticisms followed by the complaints to the police, these are entirely coincidental. These have nothing to do with each other. What do you make of that?
I think that the timing is obviously very suspicious. And I think, as to your question about an implosion, I don't think it's an implosion, but it's certainly a very damaging episode. And I think it makes it very hard for them to credibly claim that they would be any different to the self-indulging infighting that the last Tory government was subjected to. And so I think perhaps it shows a party that's sort of based more on personality than it is on policy is always going to be vulnerable to these implosions.
Matthew, the other question that this raises is that it appears to happen with Nigel Farage again and again. It seems that he has these personality clashes with people. This has happened to him in the previous parties which he has led. Does that seem to be a fundamental part of the problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got excuse me. I think you've got a double problem, which is obviously Nigel's a very big personality. He effectively controls the party. He's handed over control of it to the members, but they still can't get rid of him until half the actual membership write in, and they've got over 100 MPs and 50% of the MPs write in. So he's effectively it is still effectively a personality cult, because he is an absolute charge in a way that any other political leader can only dream of. And I think you have two things. You have Nigel as a big personality people rub up against, and also you have a slightly weird selection process where it attracts, people with big personalities themselves, rather controversial figures who may not think through how they behave. One of the scandalous things here is if the allegations themselves are worth investigating, why weren't they worth investigating when they happened rather than coincidentally on Thursday? I mean, one thing that Rupert Lowe did, and there's no dispute about this, is he went up after he asked a question to a minister, he went up and started abusing the minister in full view of the cameras and the public. This is some weeks ago. Nothing was done about him then. Lee Anderson, as chief whip, didn't step in then when normally a chief whip would have stepped in and disciplined in those circumstances. So it's double standards at best, and it shows that it's going to be complete chaos if they get anywhere near power anywhere, including in local government or in Wales, where they're hoping to get into power.
Maddie, another Richard Tice's lines this morning was that he'd been out canvassing yesterday and that no one was interested in this. No one from the public had raised this subject. And during his train journey south, or home anyway, no one had raised it either. Well, of course, if he says that, it must be true. But is this representative of the population? Do you think people are completely unaffected by this news?
Well, I think certainly a lot of people have no idea who Rupert Lowe is. I mean, when you look at the polling, an awful lot, there are people who wouldn't know who Rachel Reeves was or many frontbench ministers. I mean, I think sometimes those of us who are like political junkies who work in politics, we overestimate the extent to which ordinary people are necessarily interested in it. So there's a bit of that. But I think that the broader message about infighting and chaos and for Nigel Farage's inability to keep his team together, that message will resonate even if you're not exactly sure what's going on. It's like, we've already got to the fighting like rats in a sack stage of politics, and it's only been a few months since the general election.
Andrew, part of the dispute is about how this party should conduct itself. For instance, should it have shadow spokesmen? There were 5 of them. It made some sense. Probably makes slightly less sense still with only 4. But should they have shadow spokesmen? Should they be working out policies? Should there be meetings between them? Should there be, that idea of a team working together? Do you think that's necessary, or do you think actually Farage is just on the right tack by doing whatever he wants, saying whatever he wants, and getting Richard Tice to sweep off afterwards?
No, I think that stage of campaigning and being a sort of personality-led party is over, and as they want to transition into government, they do need to start focusing on policies. I mean, a few weeks ago, they had a policy on net zero, which I think even the biggest reform supporter would say didn't make a whole lot of sense. And so that's the real challenge now, is sort of getting away from this one-man band and creating an entity that has the disciplines that make them ready to be part of a government, as they say they want to be.
Matthew, I asked a couple of questions at the beginning. One of them was, can Keir and Kemi heave a sigh of relief? Is this the news that they've both been waiting for?
Well, I was with a senior figure from Downing Street yesterday. He was certainly smiling at the troubles as they were playing out yesterday. But I think they may breathe a small sigh of relief. I don't think this is obviously the end of the reform threat. One key thing, though, that people on the other parties will be thinking is is that reform is dependent on galvanising a lot of people to actually do what the people in other parties do, members do, which is go and deliver leaflets, stand as council candidates, etc. If that starts to run, which is one big thing that Nigel and his team have been concentrating on, if that starts to become more difficult because some of the hardcore supporters, not the general public, but the hardcore members, some start siding with Rupert Lowe, some start siding with Nigel, then you have problems. We may see local government candidates withdrawing in the next few days if they're going to side with Rupert. Twitter is alive between reformers on this subject, and I think that will give some cause for comfort to the other parties, that if the infrastructure goes, that the sort of next level of reform may not emerge in quite the way that they'd been fearing.
Maddie, my other question was, do those of us who want to see effective immigration control now despair because the pressure is off Labour and Conservative? I mean, if reform doesn't recover, let's say, the pressure is off those two parties.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point to make and very worrying indeed. I mean, time and again, the Conservative Party has tended to flank to the right only when it has had some version of reform or the Brexit Party breathing down its throat. I think any party that continues to ignore the will of the public on this, that has been expressed repeatedly at election after election and then often ignored when it comes to mass migration, will not be in power for very long, because such is the level of anger and such is it's very clear from looking at the state of public services and infrastructure, the pressure that all of this has put on. I don't really see how any party now can have a credible policy platform without addressing those things.
Thank you very much indeed, panel. That was Andrew and Matthew and Maddie, and you'll be back shortly. We're going to be discussing later whether what are the ethics really of Donald Trump's policy towards Ukraine. Coming up, talks between the US and Ukraine are set to take place in Saudi Arabia tomorrow. Defence and Foreign Affairs Editor of The Telegraph, Con Coughlin, will be joining me to discuss those talks. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
I know. So, Chef Theo Michaels joins us in the studio to talk about this. We know we've got a problem with food waste in this country, Theo, but this idea that there's a younger generation who are just reading the back of a packet and going, well, that must have gone off then, throwing it in the bin. Why do they do that when maybe we wouldn't?
Do you know what? I think we live in an increasingly sanitised, bubble-wrapped world, right, where we've become detached from our food, we've become detached from using a bit of common sense. And so I think there's a generation that are doing exactly this. They're looking at a best before date to start with, which actually is meaningless. Best before date is me turning around to you two going, the fish should be at its prime on Tuesday, right? Yeah. But that's not the use-by date. The use-by date could be a week later. You know, we say the sniff test. That's what we should be doing. So I've had it before. I had a great experience once. I walked into a supermarket and I saw an Italian guy I know, and he was jumping around with so much excitement as he was collecting handfuls of Parmesan cheese that they said, oh, it was going out of date. And he was laughing, so he was going, we aged this stuff for years. Yes. It doesn't go out of date. Yeah. So he was buying it by the truckload. And I think the key thing is there is this sort of sniff test that people talk about, but it's absolutely right. It's ingrained in us. It's instinctive that if we smell something that's off, it's like giving someone a dose of salts.
I'm also wondering, with these dates on these packaging, did it actually do a favour to the supermarkets because it meant that you're throwing them away and buying less?
100%.
Buying more.
The use-by dates only came out in the 70s, right? And that was done by one particular supermarket. And for me, I can't help be cynical about it, Bev. Who
was it? Marks and Spencer's. Was it?
Marks and Spencer's in the 70s.
They all followed suit.
And yeah.
They all followed suit.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. As many Christians across the world observe Lent, the 40 days before Easter, we'll be bringing you daily reflections from ministers around the United Kingdom. And here is today's message.
Hello, my name is Marjorie and I am a minister in the north of England. In Britain and in the church calendar, we are now entering the period traditionally known as Lent, a period when the rhythm changes for 40 days before Easter Sunday. Its origins are found in the Old Testament story of the children of Israel in the wilderness for 40 years, and then the parallel story in the Gospels of Jesus in the wilderness for 40 days, preparing his heart and soul for his ministry that was about to begin. So what do we mean by the term wilderness? A definition might be an uncivilized place which lacks the comfort for favourable living, human living. Think of the TV programme Survivor as an example. We often think of the wilderness as a hard time, a desert, something we might want to avoid. But these days, many people intentionally go into a wilderness as a spiritual, physical, emotional and mental exercise. Think of going into rehab, for example, following an addiction. You suddenly have no phone, no access to alcohol, a break with your relationships. Or maybe it's going to spend a week in a retreat in a monastery as a spiritual exercise. Many people still intentionally practice the discipline of Lent. They choose to change their rhythm of life or eating patterns and to practice simplicity, detoxing from familiar comforts and distractions. It can be a time when you ask the big questions of life. Who am I? Why am I here? Why is life worth living? Or maybe it's how am I doing?
Welcome back. Tomorrow, Saudi Arabia will host talks between Ukrainian and US officials, and the Ukrainian president will meet the Saudi Crown Prince. President Zelensky said yesterday that Ukraine is fully committed to constructive dialogue, adding that Ukraine has been seeking peace from the very first second of this war. Downing Street added yesterday that Sir Keir Starmer had spoken to his Australian counterpart Anthony Albanese by phone and welcomed his commitment to consider contributing to a coalition of the willing for Ukraine. Joining me now is Defence and Foreign Affairs editor at The Telegraph, Con Coughlin. Con, it's great to see you on the programme once again. Keir Starmer is getting a good press for his international affairs actions, but I just wonder whether we're all being conned. Is there any chance whatsoever, in your view, that Russia will allow NATO forces to be positioned in Ukraine at the end of this? And if the answer is that Russia won't allow that, why do we keep going on about a coalition of the willing?
Well, these are very good questions, Michael, and something I've been thinking about for the last few days. I mean, first of all, let's take the Russian question. I mean, the reason Russia justified its invasion of Ukraine is it felt that NATO and the West were getting far too close to Russia's borders, something that's been going on since the end of the Cold War. So if that's the Russian mindset, how on earth is the Kremlin going to allow a body of Western forces? I mean, they're ill-defined at the moment. They're hardly peacekeepers because they will have the ability to defend Ukraine. So that's not peacekeeping as I understand it. I mean, the Whitehall's talking about a reassurance force, whatever that means. And then when you actually come to drill down on Starmer and what he's positing, as you said, a lot of people have been very kind to Starmer, but you know, I asked the question, what's he actually achieved? I mean, there's been a lot of hot air. There's been talk about increasing the defence spending, which, when you drill down the numbers, amounts to very little. He's talked about this so-called force for Ukraine. We have none of the details and who's going to support it. So actually, when you sit back and analyse what Starmer and Macron and the other Europeans have been up to in the last week or so, it's more, in my view, an exercise in damage and imitation than actually producing anything constructive.
I'm glad that you've mentioned President Macron there, because I don't want to pick on Keir Starmer, but I personally thought that Macron introducing the idea of sharing the French nuclear deterrent around European nations, that it was extraordinarily unwise for NATO, for the West, to be raising the question of nuclear weapons in this context. Again and again, we've criticised Putin, quite rightly, for mentioning nuclear weapons. What on earth are we doing upping the ante?
Well, quite right. But you'll know, Michael, that from the outset of the Ukraine conflict, Macron has been trying to position himself as the chief spokesman in Europe you had that failed diplomatic initiative with Putin at the start of the conflict. He was the first one some time ago now to argue in favour of Western forces being deployed in Ukraine during the conflict. I mean, if anything's better guaranteed to escalate the war into a direct confrontation between the Kremlin and NATO, that's it. So, and here we are now, and he together with Starmer's, leading the charge on, this force for Ukraine, and as you say, introducing the notion that the force de frappe, as the French calls their nuclear deterrent, could be used to protect the whole of NATO. So, I think there's a lot of people running around like headless chickens, and it's all because of, the T word, Trump. Trump is, as we know, is a disruptor, and he's thrown everything in the air. The Europeans should have seen this coming. We knew that Trump's views on Ukraine long before he became president, and they don't seem to have a cohesive response that makes any sense.
No one is less believing of conspiracy theories than I am. I dismiss them out of hand. However,
Good.
I cannot believe the way that Trump is behaving in such a partisan way, favouring Russia and disfavouring Ukraine. Is there any danger, do you think, Con, that people around the world will come to believe that in some way Trump is signed up to Russia, that somehow he's been compromised by past contacts with Russia?
Well, as you say, there's a lot of stuff flying around, Michael. I mean, number one, there are these stories on the internet that he's a former KGB asset going back to the Soviet Union. I mean, my view on this, as I said, there's a lot of hot air around at the moment. And, as a working journalist, I drilled down on the detail and what has actually happened. What's happened so far is Trump has nudged Ukraine towards peace negotiations. We don't actually know what he's doing with Russia. I mean, an argument that I think is probably more credible is that, if you look at Russia strategically, it's in America's interest to try and drive a wedge between Russia and China, because, as you know, Washington for some years now has regarded China, not Russia or anywhere else, as the peer threat. So, if you are having joined up strategic thinking, and that's a big if, and Trump is long-term looking to push Putin away from China, well, then that starts to make sense. But, I'm not rushing to any judgment yet, Michael.
No, and I wasn't really asking you to say whether you believe the conspiracy theory, because I absolutely do not. What I'm really making is a political point. Will there come a moment when Trump needs to guard that flank, that if he's apparently so partisanly pro-Russian, people will begin to say, even in his own country, hey up, what's going on here?
I think you're quite right. And a lot of people in America, if you look at the recent opinion polls, they indicate that the American people are actually behind Ukraine, not Russia. And when you look at Russia's meddling all around the world, but in the US as well, I don't think it's a very popular move. But as I say, I'm waiting to see precisely what Trump does with Russia. And he said something I thought that was very telling during one of his recent interviews, that he basically indicated that he knows that Putin's in a weak position and will have to make concessions. So, let's see how this plays out. But as you said, in the meantime, there are a lot of conspiracy theories knocking around.
Do you know it's a privilege to benefit from your level-headed analysis, Colin?
I do my best.
Coming up, the painter of the Singing Butler, Jack Petriano, died last week. I'll be reflecting on his legacy and work with the art critic Estelle Lovett. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Well, it's a nice sculpture of an older man living in poverty, and it's been unveiled at the Tate Modern. But this is for an issue that I know basically all of our viewers and listeners, and ourselves included, really do care about.
Yeah, the activity was organised by the charity Independent Age, and it's to raise awareness of the dire financial struggles facing some older people.
Rob Trueheller is a 68-year-old pensioner who the ice sculpture depicts. Now, he's had his winter fuel payment cut off following Labour's tax raid.
Yes, and taxi driver Rob Trueheller joins us now alongside the head of policy and influencing at Independent Age, Morgan Vine. Welcome both. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Start with you, Rob. I mean, what does this sculpture mean to you then?
Well, it's there to... it's a focal point for people to look at and to understand that there's a lot of pensioners in poverty. You know, the winter fuel allowance, which was a mere spit in the ocean, really, £250 for each person, makes a heck of a difference when, you know, electricity prices, etc., are going up.
Talk to me about how this idea came about then and what Independent Age does.
So Independent Age is a national charity and we provide free independent support to older people living on a low income. We try and make sure that they're getting all of the money they're entitled to. And we also use the evidence that comes through our services and through the grants that we give out to try and work out some of the systemic problems. And one of those is that older people just don't have enough money to live on. As Rob said, they're not receiving the money they're entitled to, many of them. But even for those people that are receiving that money, it's often not enough to live on. So we think that there's more that the UK government and companies and others can do to try and improve the situation.
Yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Jack Petriano, the painter of the Singing Butler, died last week. The 73-year-old was a self-taught artist whose most famous work became the UK's best-selling art print and was reproduced as a popular greetings card. It set a Scottish price record when it was auctioned in 2004. There was much debate about Petriano's work. Some critics labelled it brainless erotica. This week, it was alleged that Petriano's appeal to millions horrified the art establishment, rather as Donald Trump's mass popularity has shocked the liberal elite. Well, joining me now is the art critic Estelle Lovett. Hello, Estelle.
Good morning.
I'm going to tell you that I feel a connection with Jack Petriano. My grandfather was the convener of the Kirkcaldy Art Gallery between 1926 and 1962, and he was a great collector of the painters Samuel Peploe and William McTaggart. Now, Petriano, as a young man, he was from Fife, went along to the Kirkcaldy Art Gallery and looked at these paintings by McTaggart and by Peploe and was inspired, and he taught himself. And I think that is a remarkable part of the story, that this was a self-taught artist. I wonder if it's also part of the origin of the snobbery that was held against him.
You're 100% correct. And what's really interesting about the Kirkcaldy Gallery, as you'll know, is that when Petriano used to go in there and sit there and make copies and transcriptions to learn about composition and colour and tonal value from the masters that preceded him, he was there so often that the security became a bit suspicious and thought that he was there planning a heist or something, you know, checking the joint out, not realising that he was just really inspired by the pieces that were hanging there. And you're right, self-taught painter. We can owe everything down to when he was 21, his girlfriend gave him a box of watercolours for his 21st birthday. And the rest is history. Don't forget, though, when he wanted to go to art college, his portfolio was rejected. He's been rejected early on by the Royal Academy Summer Show, which is sort of like the gauge to judge what's popular in contemporary art. But is it what's popular. You know, to me, Vetriano is a very underrated artist. Yes, okay, perhaps he's more emotional than he is intellectual. And if you're attracted to the likes of Damien Hirst or an admirer of the young British artists, you perhaps aren't going to be having the feel-good harmony in a frame that Vetriano creates. But Vetriano creates magical private moments, isolated scenes that are full of suggested poses. They're not naked figures. And, you know, the critics say, oh, yeah, well, it's soft porn or it's erotica fantasy. It's for the brainless and the feeble. Well, then count me and you, Michael, as part of the brainless and the feeble, because there is definitely a disconnect between the art world and the commercial market.
Yeah, but I feel a certain guilt when I appreciate it, I must admit, because it is so easy, it is so approachable, it's so immediately appealing. I don't feel that I'm using much intellect as I'm responding to a Vetriano. I just think, oh, you know, that's a great image. There's one on the screen at the moment, which is a very good example, 4 men in brimmed hats, or a lady now we're seeing on screen carrying a striped deck chair. Easy stuff. Should I be feeling a little bit guilty, a little bit queasy if I enjoy these paintings?
No, not at all. You know, it's interesting how he's been sort of shirked, and the art world is divided, and he was ousted, roasted by the art world on a spit, and still remains almost noticeably one of the non-existent major artists in major public galleries. There's room for them all. I mean, let's think about what's going on over the other side of the pond. The equivalent to Vetriano for us here would be Edward Hopper and Norman Rockwell. They're storytellers. And the cinematography, the vibe that Vetriano gives off is so Hitchcock. You know, beautiful scenes, wonderful neo-realistic dress. There's no politics, there's no social references, and boy, oh boy, don't we all need a break from that now? Don't forget as well, the critics didn't like Van Gogh or Lowry or even Rembrandt. Rembrandt died a pauper. He's somewhere in a pauper's grave, God knows where. You know, so this art world snobbery isn't doing the art world any good. And I love the fact that the singing butler, you'll know this, Michael, it came inspired when Vetriano was copying from the illustrator's figure reference manual, and the Irish actress Orla Brady, when she was in her 20s, so she's now in her 60s, so going back 40 years, she posed for the photographs in this book that Vetriano copied. So you haven't just got Vetriano, you've got Orla Brady, you've also got you and I, because you'll notice very cleverly what Vetriano does is he doesn't show a face full on. It's either hidden underneath the brim of a hat, or it's in profile, or it's the back of the head. So that the figures could be you and I, Michael. Yeah. But you're buying all this history. And then, of course, with Orla Brady, she played every character from Shakespeare to Star Trek. So you're not just buying a Vetriano painting. And what's magnificent is Banksy's crude oil, which is inspired his version, Banksy's version of the singing butler, just sold at the beginning of last week for 4.3 million at Sotheby's auction. So there's so much history, you know, and if Banksy takes it on, Banksy is the street artist for everybody of all ages with a message. If he understood it and took it on, then the rest of the people, I think, are missing something.
We're going to look at another example of someone who took it on, because Mark Hannon produced a very amusing pastiche of the singing butler, in which he has Donald Trump dancing with himself, and that's just come up on our screen now, and it's very clearly a pastiche. So, so well known did the singing butler in particular become that it was possible for other artists to do takes on that. Just very, very briefly, we've only got a moment left. I think he's rather like Hopper and Rockwell, but they're highly respected. Why was Vetriano not respected like Hopper and Rockwell?
Wrong time, wrong place, I suppose. When you consider what was going on in the art world, You know, he wasn't a bad boy of art and self-taught. You know, so maybe people sort of feel, oh, you have to go to art college. You don't have to go to art college. You know, look at Van Gogh. He was self-taught primarily as well. Most of the great artists are going to be horrified by the fact that one would have to go to art school. But the Singing Butler, what's lovely about it as well is there's a play on titles. So we get the fact, even though we can't hear it, we know the butler's providing the music. So Vetriano's covered all the corners magnificently.
Oh, marvellous. You've certainly pricked the balloon today. Thank you very much indeed, Estelle. Coming up, Stefan Kyriazis will join us once more. He'll give us his view on the new production of Anton Chekhov's The Seagull that spread its wings in the West End this week. But first, if you're in search of some winter sun, here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there. Low pressure still dominates western parts of the Mediterranean. Outbreaks of showers, heavy rain, some strong winds as well. Temperatures a little below average for the time of year. Through Monday, showers across the west, some longer spells of rain, Spain and Portugal there. Showers across into Italy, temperatures in the mid-teens. But the rest of the dry weather across Greece, across into Turkey as well. Plenty of sunny spells here. And the outlook for is it to improve a little with temperatures rising too.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Well, today, most of us will see another fine and sunny day, and in the sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm for the time of year. It's not going to be everywhere, though. The very far north of Scotland, we continue with some cloud and rain here, and also very down towards the very far southwest, could just see a few showery outbreaks of rain from time to time. But for a lot of the UK, lots of sunshine around, and in the sunshine, temperatures will really respond quite widely into the high teens across much of England and Wales, and we could see a few spots reaching 20 degrees, that's 68 in Fahrenheit. As we move into the evening, this band of cloud and rain across the far north of Scotland will gradually begin to sink a little bit further southwards, but for much of Scotland and Northern Ireland, it will be a very fine end to the day with some late sunshine. Much of England and Wales also very similar, fine end to the weekend to come. Really, the exceptions are going to be down towards the very far southwest of England, where, again, we could just see a few spots of rain to end Sunday. So moving into the nighttime period, that band of rain across Scotland will continue to sink its way a little bit further south. Behind it, much colder air and also quite a brisk breeze developing. But for a lot of the UK, it's going to be a fairly quiet night. Could see some mist and fog form, especially along some North Sea coasts, and in the countryside, it will turn pretty chilly as we start Monday morning. But for a lot of England and Wales, we do start the day fairly bright once any early mist and fog clears. But cloud will begin to bubble up quite widely across the UK during the course of Monday, so much more cloud in the sky compared to the weekend. That band of rain across Scotland will track its way into parts of Northern Ireland and Northern England as the afternoon goes on. Behind it, much colder. Temperatures really struggling across Scotland, but still reaching the mid-teens across much of England and Wales.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Headliners on GB News, 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Not everything Russian has been cancelled in Britain. The works of Anton Chekhov are still admired and performed. And Stefan Kyriazis is here to reflect on a new production of The Seagull. And Stefan, I can't help observing that you are not alone.
No, I've brought a very noted Chekhov expert with me. He's a scholar, so he's going to help us out a little bit. This is Rafa Kyriazis making his
for those who are listening
TV
on
debut.
The radio, there is a small dog sitting on Stefan's lap.
He's a Yorkie poo. So.
Very good.
Anyway.
Either one of you can reply to this. How was The Seagull?
So it's director Thomas Ostermeyer, sort of Berlin enfant terrible, and he was very much famous for saying it, nobody over 40 should be in the arts. They're not relevant, before he was himself over 40. But he still plays with that in this. And he did Enemy of the People with Matt Smith last year, which I did not like. It was very polemic, very political, very in your face. It didn't get the balance, and it lost the nuance. So when I heard that this one was going to be lightly staged, plastic chairs, microphones, actors all speaking in their own accents, and we go from the Midlands to Australia, I was pretty nervous. However, we haven't got any proper video, but we've got my curtain call, so you can see a little idea of the atmosphere. It's basically this field of grass, and that's pretty much it. Everybody's in modern dress. You can see it's an empty stage. You can see there are microphones. This should all trigger me horribly. Instead, we had Zachary Hart, one of the actors who plays a secondary character, Medvedenko, and he strolls on at the start, electric guitar strapped across him, and just gets to the microphone and literally is like, anybody up for some Chekhov? And the crowd cheers, and then he gets them to cheer even louder, revs it up, gives us a bit of bitty brag. It could all go horribly wrong. It could not have worked, and yet I loved every second. The energy level is high. You've got Cate Blanchett as Arkadina, who is this self-absorbed actress, lightly updated by Duncan Macmillan. The text is gorgeous, so she's more of a Hollywood actress.
When we get to the Chekhov, when we get to the Seagull, after the whatever you said, the brag at the beginning, is it pure Chekhov?
It's Duncan Macmillan's text, but yes, it's glorious. And basically, he's always said that it's a comedy, and this is drawing on the kind of Aristotle idea that comedy is when characters cannot see their own truth, tragedy is when they do. Towards the end, we absolutely go into tragedy. Yes, it breathes, the language works, you get a sense of all the characters. The performances are flawless. Every time someone came on, it's another face I recognised. Blanchett is sensational. And it's also a play about art, making art, theatre, the importance of it in the world. And she has scenes where she actually takes her mic pack off, and when she's emotional, she's like, I don't want to play this scene. And it's as much about the play as about what the character's going through, and the fact that she, as a character, is a performer. So she can't stop performing, she can never be real. And the whole cast...
How did you leave the theatre? What was your...
I left the theatre, kind of moved. The tragedy hits very hard at the end, but thoroughly entertained all the way through. It operates on so many levels. It gets all the nuances. It also speaks to what is theatre, what's the importance of theatre, and they have dialogues about that. And it's ultimately about love, and everybody that loves the wrong thing, wants the wrong thing, is never satisfied with what they have. And we can all sit there absolutely relating to that. So for me, there's been a few dissenters amongst the critics, but mainly, we've all loved it this time. I absolutely loved it. Can't recommend highly enough. It's on at the Barbican until April the 5th. Hugely sold out. However, there is a weekly lottery with £35 tickets, and I would say go through Today Tix, which is the website that does a lot of ticket offers. So worth a try. This is sensational. It's event theatre that actually justifies its existence. So I loved it.
No, that's a great review. Now, for something I think quite different, Ballet, Romeo and Juliet, not just different because they're two genres, but because we're talking about a traditional production now, a Macmillan choreographed Romeo and Juliet at the Royal Opera House.
Yeah, with a bit of Russian. We've still got Prokofiev and his mournful tones. We've got the trailer here to get you in the mood.
Mournful.
Here's the trailer. We can argue about that afterwards.
I suppose you can call it mournful, but I find it terribly exciting. Now, I can confirm that is a production I've seen already. It's identical, nothing new there. But you were saying to me earlier that you've somehow been converted.
Yes.
To this. How come?
So I think this is very much, it is a production that relies on acting, which I've said again recently with a couple of things at the Royal Ballet. You can't just dance beautifully. This is Romeo and Juliet. It is basically the most ludicrous insta-love by two foolish teenagers and all the craziness that happens around it. So you've got to somehow invest in it. And I took one of my best friends who's a sort of Shakespeare scholar, so she's all about the words, and she came out absolutely blown away because somehow the choreography is so vivid, there's emotional storytelling, you follow what's going on. And for me, in a way, controversially, when it works, it's almost better than the play because I have many problems with the play, however glorious the language is. But here, it all depends, I think, on the two leads. So I won't name names, but in the past, maybe I haven't seen people that I truly invested in. You've got to have chemistry, they've got to be able to act. And this time we had Matthew Ball playing Romeo, and he is sensationally handsome, but also a very virile, beautiful dancer. And he was opposite Yasmin Nagdi, and they've been a couple for a while now. She does that featherlight thing, but with incredible power and control. And he plays the kind of feckless fool at the start that's just fancying every girl that comes. She's very naive. And then the whole storyline, their pas de deux together are beautiful. You can see them there together. Capography, I'm going to be practicing at home. There's lots of swirling capes and everything for the drama. The whole stage is packed. There's market scenes, fight scenes, duels. There's the grand ball with the famous bit of music that we love. And somehow I was sitting there in the middle going, I actually really love this. It really worked.
I wonder if you're just maturing. Perhaps you're coming over.
Certainly not. How dare you? Never going to happen.
But I am delighted that you enjoyed it. Now, you mentioned those two principals. One of the issues with ballet, of course, is that you can look up who the principals are going to be, but you've just mentioned two principals. They'll probably not be the people that you'll see next week or the week after.
I mean, they do have a very, very sensational bunch of principals. The pairing I saw way back when are two very garlanded dancers that were in a relationship, and for some, in real life, it just didn't translate on stage, which is often the case. There are some really sensational casts for this one. It's on for a while till May the 26th, but from March the 20th, there's a live feed to cinemas, which they do often. It's glorious. I've been to the cinema to watch the ballet, and you see everything in close up. You've got the surround sound. I thoroughly recommend doing it that way if you can't get tickets. But yeah, they've got a sensational lineup now of principals, so I would be fairly secure going to see it with most of them. But it's beautiful. I found it deeply moving. I was invested in the story. There's a few little dragged out deaths. There's lots of the kind of staggering around, and it goes on for a very long time, but that's in the play as well. But I was convinced and moved.
You seem to have put Rafa to sleep.
Yes.
I hope you've not had the same effect on our audience.
It might be you, Michael.
We had a jolly good audience till you came on.
He doesn't do that with he doesn't do that with me. Wake up. There we go.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure.
That concludes the first hour of Sunday with Michael Portillo. Please rejoin me at noon, when my panel will discuss the ethics of Donald Trump's foreign policy as he switches off the intelligence systems and Russia destroys infrastructure and lives in Ukraine. We are witnessing the end of architecture, according to a leading architect. He's called Patrick Schumacher. He thinks that woke virtue signalling is to blame. Then Aidan Phelan, who was once famed as David Beckham's personal hairstylist and was the creative force behind his iconic mohawk, has now turned to art, and he will join me to discuss his new exhibition. And it's the first Sunday of Lent. Historian Tony McMahon will be here to lift the mask on Mardi Gras celebrations. He's been in Rio de Janeiro. A lot to look forward to. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello,
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. For many, it's a fine Sunday out there, but we'll start to see a change in store, rain arriving from the north and turning colder next week. Taking a look at the bigger picture then, we do have this area of low pressure down towards the south, could just bring in a bit of cloud here, but this is the cold front that will introduce colder air through into Monday. But out there, through much of Sunday, plenty of sunshine on offer, quite hazy at times across the south or west of England, but Orkney and Shetland will see some heavier spells of rain, just gradually sinking southwards. Otherwise, as for temperatures, not doing too bad at all in that sunshine, staying on the mild side for the time of year. We may even get 18, 19, possibly 20 degrees across the central parts of England today. So as we go through Sunday evening, heavy spells of rain, especially across parts of Shetland, and this will gradually sink its way southwards. But for the vast majority of Scotland, staying dry into this evening. Likewise for much of Northern Ireland and across much of England as well. We will start seeing some mist and fog patches develop, and across the far south we'll hold on to a bit more cloud through Sunday evening and into the start of Monday. So as we go through Sunday evening and Monday morning, this band of rain across much of northern parts of Scotland will gradually continue to sink its way southwards, perhaps turning a little bit wintry over the hills. Across much of England and Wales, though, we will see a bit more cloud, so it is going to be frost-free out there for most of us, with a strengthening wind coming down from the north later. So as we start Monday morning then, across parts of Scotland, we have this band of rain with a bit of a wintry mix, especially across the hills. That will slowly sink its way southwards into northern parts of England, bring some patchy rain. Elsewhere, generally a cloudier picture. There will be some brighter interludes, but not as mild here. But across the north, that's where it's going to be turning colder, with a brisk northerly wind developing. Bye-bye.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could have £17,777 in tax-free cash to play with this spring. Cash to spend on anything you like. And if that wasn't enough, we're also going to give you not one, but two sought-after designer watches and the latest Mulberry handbag. How would winning that sound? For a chance to win the cash, 2 watches and a designer bag, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
Because you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. In The Secret Garden, Frances Hodgson Bennett describes spring as the sun shining on the rain and the rain falling on the sunshine. After a week of mild weather, you are warmly welcome, dear viewers, to another hour of arts, culture, politics and current affairs here on Sunday with Michael Portillo. It seems that Donald Trump's policy could now be costing Ukrainian lives. Deprived of intelligence, computer power and military equipment previously supplied by the US government and private sector, Ukraine is losing lives to Russian bombs and missiles. Can that be morally right? Did the United States perhaps pursue an unusually ethical policy by backing a beleaguered but distant democracy for 3 years? My panel will discuss. Are we witnessing the end of architecture? Leading architect Patrick Schumacher thinks so. He will be discussing the sinking standards and virtue signalling in his industry. The man behind David Beckham's iconic mohawk, celebrity hairstylist Aidan Phelan, has now turned to artwork. He will talk to me about his new exhibition. And today is the first Sunday of Lent. Historian Tony McMahon will tickle our imaginations, having returned from the Carnival celebrations in Rio de Janeiro, which mark Mardi Gras or Shrove Tuesday. But first, your news headlines with Sam Francis.
Michael, thank you very much and good afternoon to you. Just coming up to 2 minutes past midday. Let's start with a breaking update coming to us out of the United States this hour. We're hearing reports from US media that shots have been fired just a block from the White House, with Secret Service agents there saying they have shot a man after he pulled a gun on officers. Police had reportedly warned the agency about a so-called suicidal individual travelling to Washington from Indiana. And just after midnight, agents spotted him. As they moved in, the man brandished a firearm. Officers saying they then opened fire, leaving the suspect in a critically injured condition. He has been rushed to hospital. That confrontation, as I say, unfolded just west of the West Wing. No Secret Service agents, though, have been hurt in the incident, and police there are now leading the investigation. We will, of course, keep across any developments for you as it happens. We understand that Donald Trump, president, was in Florida at the time of that confrontation. In other news this afternoon, underperforming civil servants could be incentivised to leave their jobs under government plans to overhaul the service. Cabinet Office Minister Pat McFadden says it's not match fit for what the country needs, promising a shake-up where top officials' pay is linked to performance. The government insists it will create a more focused and productive civil service, but unions say it's just a soundbite with no real plan for change. McFadden is expected to outline those reforms next week. Well, earlier he spoke, that is Pat McFadden, I say, who spoke to us here on GB News. He said the reforms will be radical, but insists it's not about stripping back the state.
What's really important is to get the best value for money for people, make sure these are good jobs that people want to do, and make sure that when we use public resources, it's where the public really want to see it. And that's why we fought the election saying, let's hire more teachers, let's hire more police officers, let's make sure that when taxpayers are paying in, they get a good outcome. That's what we want to see.
In other news this afternoon, 2,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel in just over a week, making up now half of all arrivals so far this year. Among them, a Palestinian man with alleged extremist links. He's accused of posting anti-Israel hate messages and posing in photos with automatic weapons. The campaign against anti-Semitism says he has ties to a former Hamas leader, but the Home Office won't confirm if he has been detained so far. Well, Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp told us earlier that he thinks Labour has lost control of our borders and vowed the Tories would crack down on foreign criminals.
What the Home Office needs to do is identify where this despicable individual is and, frankly, remove him from the country back to Palestine immediately. He clearly has no place in the United Kingdom and potentially poses a threat to our fellow citizens. And this just illustrates why it is so important to get control of our borders and to stop these boat crossings. Unfortunately, since the general election, these boat crossings under Labour have gone up by about 28%. And these are the kind of people that Labour are now letting into the country.
Syrian security forces are accused of massacring hundreds of civilians in the worst violence since rebels toppled Bashar al-Assad's regime in December. A war monitor says 745 civilians have been killed in 30 attacks along the coast over the weekend, with over 1,000 dead in just 2 days. Hundreds have fled, with large crowds seeking refuge at the Russian military base there, chanting for protection. Syria's government claims to have re-established control, though calling the attacks treacherous. The UN's envoy says he's deeply alarmed and is urging all sides to avoid further escalation. Russia's latest missile strikes on Ukraine have been condemned as abhorrent by Foreign Secretary David Lammy, who says Moscow's barbaric aggression only strengthens UK support for Kyiv. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the attacks, which have killed at least 11 people in Dobrofilia, have proved that Russia has no... Apologies for the issues there with the pictures. Let's turn now to our final story. And the UK is marking 5 years since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, with a nationwide day of reflection today. Bereaved families will be walking the National COVID Memorial Wall in London, casting flowers from Lambeth Bridge in memory of those lost. Events are also taking place across the rest of the country, including a special service in Manchester, a commemoration in Sheffield, and a concert in Belfast. Those are the latest headlines. Another roundup from me in around half an hour. Now, though, it's straight back to Michael.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Francis will keep you up to date with that breaking news from Washington, D.C. Donald Trump says he wants peace. He has turned off military aid and intelligence support to Ukraine, and private companies have closed off their computer systems. Is it ethical, in pursuit of so-called peace, to increase the chances that, at least in the short term, Ukrainian civilians and soldiers will die? On the other hand, was the United States ever morally obliged to provide support to Ukraine, just because it was invaded by a warmongering neighbour? Has the United States already done as much as could reasonably be expected to help a far-off country of which J.D. Vance knows little? Joining me now is my panel, parliamentary sketch writer at The Telegraph, Madeline Grant, a policy fellow at Onward, Andrew Barclay, and former Labour advisor, Matthew Lazar. Matthew, what do you think? The President says he wants peace. He says that the Russians are easier to deal with than the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians, would go on fighting because they're defending their homeland. So is it morally defensible to be switching off their systems and their aid at this time?
Absolutely not. He doesn't care about peace. He cares about trying to get the Nobel Peace Prize for himself. Thank goodness, I'm sure he's going to keep dreaming on that one. And being the person who secured at any price for the Ukrainian mineral rights. And in the meantime, he's going to have blood on his hands. Indeed, as we've seen over the last 36 hours, already there are casualties who probably otherwise wouldn't be in the state they're in if the American support, including the satellite imagery, were still going. So I think it is the most shameful episode that I've ever seen in world politics over the last month, and it's the most shameful month in American history for a very, very long time.
You're not a spokesman for the Labour Party, but you've been associated with it in the past. And you're talking
There is no escape.
you're talking about the President having blood on his hands. You're talking about it being shameful. These are not words we're going to hear from government ministers. Do you think Labour Party discipline on this matter can be sustained? I think there must be quite a lot of Labour MPs who would use the same phraseology as you would.
Absolutely, but I think there were quite a lot of MPs of all parties in the House who would use the same phraseology because it's self-evidently the case. And I think in terms of Labour discipline, I think it will be maintained because I think, I mean, look, we all know that Keir Starmer, when he meets Donald Trump, is doing so and is grinding his teeth when the cameras aren't rolling because he can clearly, Donald Trump's instincts are not Keir Starmer's instincts, nor, frankly, the instincts of any decent person, or whatever their political views. But obviously, as the government, the Prime Minister, Foreign Secretary et al. Have to deal with and get the best out of a very, very difficult situation, which is what they've been trying to do over the last few weeks. I actually think it's been Keir's best few weeks in government. I think it's shown his strengths, and hopefully the most important thing is that it's going to produce the best solution in these very difficult circumstances with the talks that are about to start. I think the best hope, I mean, obviously we know the best hope would have been continued US support, but in the circumstances, I think Labour will stay disciplined behind a Prime Minister doing the right thing, not just for the UK, but frankly for Ukraine and the world.
Maddie, is Matthew being too severe? If you take one thing with another, for 3 years the United States has sustained Ukraine in its fight. Ukraine is a long way away, and the President of the United States is a democratically elected officer. There must be a limit to United States patience. A lot of money has gone into the Ukrainian war effort. Could we say, taking one thing with another, that the United States has done everything that could be required of it, ethically speaking?
Well, I think that, recent actions suggest that no, they haven't. And I would argue that there is always, in everything that Donald Trump says, however much we disagree with parts of it, there are also parts of it that are completely true and completely onto something. And the fact is that Europe shamefully neglected its own defence. We neglected ours, but we were still one of the better countries and one of the few that actually met the NATO requirement of 2% of GDP for a considerable length of time. And we partly did that by various bits of sophistry involving the budgets, right? So we have neglected it and we have coasted on American largesse for too long. So that is a fair point. But on the point about ethics, I think that we forget often that in 1994, I think the US and the UK agreed to guarantee the safety of Ukraine in the Budapest Memorandum. And part of that deal involved Ukraine ceding any right it had to nukes. So obviously that left them in a very different position materially. And therefore, I think we do have a debt of responsibility that goes beyond the usual kind of multilateral thinking, basically. We have a specific obligation.
But perhaps the responsibility of a leader is to reduce the death toll overall. An example that you'll know, before D-Day, we savagely bombed the north of France, killing many Frenchmen.
Yes.
Actually, we bombed the areas where we weren't invading twice as much as we bombed the area where we were invading to mislead the Germans. Thousands of Frenchmen were killed because it was worth it. We were going to end the war. We were going to stop the killing. We were going to stop the Holocaust and everything else. But by the same logic, yes, some Ukrainians are dying now, but if the war is brought to an end by Trump, Ukrainians won't die anymore. That could be the theory.
Yes, that's such an interesting point about the war. My grandfather served in... he was fighting the Japanese in Burma, and he and all his men felt that when the atomic bomb was dropped, although it caused, unimaginable horror at the time, that they owed their lives to it, because if they had carried on fighting in those conditions, then they probably wouldn't have come out alive. And I think that is the thing with Donald Trump. It's always hard to analyse what he's actually saying, because he says one thing, potentially part of some bigger game that we don't understand, or some bigger gambit. Famously, he loved poker rather than chess. So I think you can tell if he's bluffing and what exactly is meant. So it can be very difficult to, I think sometimes people leap on small utterances and not looking at the bigger picture.
Andrew, do you have a good word to say for Donald Trump's policy towards Ukraine and Russia?
I think I agree with Maddie. The ethical obligation is that we convince them to give up their nukes in return for a security. It's the UK, the US and France in return for a security guarantee. So it's plain wrong to go back on that, especially to go back on any agreement, especially on matters of life or death, of this which is one. But the second point is that the Putin regime, aside from the horrors of war, is also pursuing kidnapping of children on like an industrial scale. I think 20,000 babies and kids have been kidnapped, taken out of Ukraine and put in Russia. So we have to support Ukraine, not only in defence of their territory, but in defence of their own people, right until the very last minute. especially if we want peace, because you have to strengthen their hand in those negotiations.
All right, so if on a panel on GB News we can't get anyone to say a word in favour of Donald Trump, does this suggest that Nigel Farage has made quite an error in being so half-hearted in his support of Ukraine?
I personally think he has. I think it's clear where the British public stand on this issue. I think, as Maddie said, Trump is not a career politician. He pursues a different way of speaking about things. I think his words aren't as valuable as we would like them to be. And maybe there's some type of Hail Mary that's going to come from it. But it certainly undermines a lot of the agreements. I think the behaviour we've seen in the Oval Office demeans the office. And I would much rather see an America that is the world's policeman, as they have been since the end of World War II, and doing a great job of it.
Yeah, but just a brief answer, please, Andrew. It is the cry of the eunuch. We go back to this guarantee, but the security guarantee has to be supplied by the United States because we can't do it.
No.
The United States has to be the world policeman because we can't do it. It's just the cry of the eunuch, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, as Maddie said, Europe needs to definitely, where Trump is right, is Europe needs to do so much more to take responsibility for our own security. That's absolutely right, alongside America.
Can I just say one thing? The analogy I would use is that the person who invited you to dinner pays the bill for the restaurant, right? America also calls the shots. It hasn't got nothing in exchange for propping up European defence. And sometimes it's led us into catastrophic policy decisions.
Yes. All noted. Thank you very much, panel. Madeline Grant, Andrew Barclay, Matthew Lazo. Coming up, are we witnessing the end of architecture? Leading architect Patrick Schumacher thinks so. He joins me next to discuss sinking standards and virtue signalling in his industry. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Well, this is Chris.
This is the Botticelli's Venus.
Oh,
right?
this gets me incensed. This is unbelievable.
Right.
Woke union chiefs.
But there we are. There's the famous
have
painting.
said that this must be taken down.
The birth of Venus.
This must not be watched. You mustn't look at this.
And there's a trigger warning.
Trigger warning.
As well, right?
Yes.
And I don't know who's put the trigger warning on this. Is it the museum where it's held, or
Some union chiefs.
Oh, right.
Woke union chiefs. I mean, this is
so.
just...
What is the offence now with that? What?
You can see her belly button.
Oh.
And a little bit of her titties. I mean, it's a beautiful painting.
Yeah, the trigger warning is that this painting may involve nudity. Well, it is a Botticelli, it is Venus.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to involve nudity.
And there are lots of wonderful paintings that involve nudity. You can't suddenly say now, in 25, you can't look at these.
You'd have to shut down every art gallery in the world.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, it would be ridiculous.
We are living in 1984 now, aren't we? I mean, not literally the year, but the whole censorship thing. It's like groupthink, you must do this, you must do that. You can't have independent thought.
Yeah.
You can't look at works of art in case you start thinking the wrong way.
It's just like newsflash, classical paintings will probably have nudity in them.
Yes.
You're right. Angling, and
And compared to what you can see on Instagram.
Well, yes.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Is architecture being choked by wokery? The architect who played a significant role in designing buildings including the London Aquatic Centre, the Beijing Daxing International Airport, the Opus Tower in Dubai and the Guangzhou Opera House in China believes so. Patrick Schumacher says the lack of innovation in modern building design, what he labelled the dismal state of the discipline, was down to sinking standards and the prevailing woke culture in schools of architecture. I'm privileged to be joined by Patrick Schumacher now. Patrick, welcome to GB News. At whom is this aimed? First of all, are we talking about the West and the East, or is this a Western phenomenon?
Wholly Western phenomenon, which excludes China, where things are still in a healthy state.
What's happening in the West, then?
It's been going on for quite a while, and it started with the universities and then affected the biennales conferences. Basically, it's a left drift and a sense that, as in Vogue, we should care about the downtrodden, the marginal groups, the global south. We should criticize what's going on, and there's a sense of illegitimacy with everything which now is developed in most of the real-world developments we are, for instance, doing, as being neoliberal architecture. And so the discourse is shifting away, ignoring that and saying this is fallen, this is commercial, this is compromised. And we have a discourse about another world caring and looking after those who have been discriminated against. And that pulls a discourse and critical debate away from what's going on. And therefore what's going on is bereft of critique, of exposure, of debate, and becomes a craft.
We are looking at, on the screen at the moment, at some of the great buildings that you have been involved in. So tell me about the background to these. I mean, you were one of the architects here. What was your education? What was your inspiration? What led you to create buildings that look like that?
So I was originally educated in Stuttgart, Germany. I came here as a student, went to the South Bank University in the exchange program, and as a student joined Zaha Hadid, was a rising star in the field. And at that time, there was really a thriving discourse in architecture, grappling with this new world, which was what I call the post-Fordist restructuring, which also was expressed through Thatcher-Reagan revolution, liberalization of everything, and the market guiding and leading, and architects leading the market. And that was a thriving world, and the firm kind of developed its reputation and capacity there. But the last 10, 15 years, actually more or less since the financial crisis, 2008, that kind of positive, thriving movement was stopped, and the world of academia in particular, and then the whole culture of discourse in architecture shifted into this Vogue territory.
Right. We've been looking at some of your massive public buildings. The thing you're talking about, does this manifest itself more in domestic buildings? Are we talking about housing estates and things like that? Or does it manifest itself also in grand buildings?
It manifests itself very predominantly, for instance, in housing provision. First of all, it's small and smaller than it should be. It's quite conservative. There's a lot of let's say, community participation. A lot of stakeholders have to say yes, and mostly they try to prevent. So things become very, very modest and very safe and very standard-driven. So this kind of politics of planning and prescription is also signaling back to the architectural discipline. There's nothing we can express our research and development and experimentation with. So then we're asked to kind of talk about community inclusion, etc. And then this influences also the discipline, and therefore there's a lack of ambition, a lack of a sense of innovation, exploration, particularly in the West, but also the Anglo-Saxon world, particularly, strangely, the elite universities have been first and most affected by this.
I assume that quality costs money, doesn't it? If you want to do something which is expressive, is that simply more than local authorities can afford?
Yes, but there are solutions. For instance, the wonderful young entrepreneur created so-called co-living, very, very small units, but then on every floor, a shared kitchen, free co-working spaces, a lot of social spaces, and a new dynamic. But the planners, with their thinking of standards, prevent that. So I think we would have solutions, even in residential and low-cost residential, I believe, if the market and the developers could become entrepreneurs, but everything is prescribed. And the discourse at schools of architecture doesn't allow for much of this. They're actually going to the global south. They're looking at, not at the frontier in the advanced countries and cultures, but they're looking at catch-up. But there, the solution's already there. You know, if you only look at the bottom 10%, they should aspire to what the next 10% already have. Some basic infrastructure, more space, proper sanitary equipment. So that can't inspire an architectural school. So that's why also in these schools, you don't design anymore, but also in the biennales, like the great Venice Biennale, which was a fantastic gathering of architects from around the world, there's not a single building or built development being shown. It's just documenting deprivation and critiquing that.
You have linked architecture to politics in a way that I hadn't really thought about. Since Trump is the great disruptor, since everything is changing again, do you have some hope that in the disruption created by Donald Trump, new architecture might thrive?
To some extent, and I mean, I've been watching this woke culture and accumulating over the last 15 years, let's say, and 9 years ago I was caught up and nearly cancelled, and now you're giving me a platform. At that point I was deplatformed, making some of those points. I think the backlash has been building up more and more already. Yeah. And now Trump comes in and goes strongly against it. But in a lot of these left circles, it's actually kind of retrenchment and further aggressiveness. So I was very much criticized that into this space, where maybe there's an overshooting on the anti-woke side, that are coming out with this, which wasn't actually timed for that. So I've been now told that using the phrase woke is like using an racist slur. So we should not, feed into that.
Anything to close down the conversation.
That's right.
Thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure.
Schumacher, and congratulations on the fabulous buildings with which you've been involved. Coming up, the man who was once famed as Donald Beckham's personal hairstylist, the creative force behind his iconic mohawk, Aidan Phelan, has now turned to art. He'll join me to discuss his new exhibition. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just coming up to 12:30. Let's bring you a recap on that breaking news we mentioned in the last half hour or so from the United States, where shots have reportedly been fired just a block from the White House. The Secret Service agents have shot a man after he pulled a gun on officers there. Police had been warning the agency about a suicidal individual travelling from Indiana. Just after midnight, agents spotted him and then moved in. The man was brandishing a firearm. Officers opened fire, leaving him critically injured and rushed to hospital. You can see there on screen, if you're watching on television, a statement from the officers involved in that shooting, saying that an adult male has been shot by US Secret Service personnel following that armed confrontation. It unfolded just west of the West Wing. No Secret Service agents, though, were hurt in the confrontation, and police are now leading the investigation. Here, underperforming civil servants could be incentivised to leave their jobs under government plans to overhaul the service. Cabinet Office Minister Pat McFadden says it's not match fit for what the country needs and is promising a shake-up where top officials' pay would be linked to performance. The government insists it will create more focused and productive civil servants, but unions say it's just a soundbite with no real plan for change. McFadden is expected to outline the reforms next week. Well, earlier, Pat McFadden joined us here on GB News and told Camilla Tominey that he thinks the reforms will be radical, but insists it's not about stripping back the state.
What's really important is to get the best value for money for people, make sure these are good jobs that people want to do, and make sure that when we use public resources, it's where the public really want to see it. And that's why we fought the election saying, let's hire more teachers, let's hire more police officers, let's make sure that when taxpayers are paying in, they get a good outcome. That's what we want to see.
Nigel Farage has defended suspending MP Rupert Lowe, warning constant infighting damages political parties. Writing in The Telegraph, the Reform UK leader said Lowe's public criticism had dented party unity and called it inconceivable to ignore bullying allegations and threats against the party chairman. Claims, though, Lowe strongly denies. Now sitting as an independent, he insists there's zero credible evidence and says Farage's account is an entirely false and poisonous narrative. An independent inquiry is now underway as Reform's 5 MPs have dropped to 4 amid the escalating divisions in the party. And a man has been arrested after spending more than 16 hours barefoot on top of Big Ben's clock tower holding a Palestine flag. He scaled the Elizabeth Tower on Saturday morning, finally coming down just after midnight, with police using a cherry picker to bring him down. Video from the scene shows negotiators warning him about an injury to his foot, but he insisted he would only descend on his own terms. The incident has raised security concerns, with an MP demanding answers on how the man entered Parliament so easily. All roads have now reopened, and police say that they are working to resolve the standoff safely. Those are the latest headlines. A full roundup from me at 1 o'clock, and Michael will be back after this.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I developed achalasia when I was 17, but achalasia can impact people of all ages. So what I experienced when I first developed achalasia was essentially when I was eating, food was getting stuck here, so in my esophagus, and it just really wouldn't go down. So you know when you're eating a piece of bread, a big piece of bread really fast, and it kind of gets stuck and you need water. That was my first symptom. And that was happening every now and again when I was eating, but then it started happening every time I was swallowing. So that made eating incredibly difficult and painful. And I used to have to drink, well, I still do drink a lot of water whilst I'm eating, but I was really having to gulp loads of water in it. It was really painful at every gulp. And that led to quite a lot of weight loss. So a lot of people with achalasia, because of the difficulties they experience in swallowing, they lose weight because either they avoid food or they're regurgitating food as well, so they have to kind of get it out, and so it can be really unpleasant. Obviously, you experience a lot of pain, and it impacts on every part of your social life as well, and on your general life. People end up being malnourished, losing loads of weight, and that impacts on your everyday life and work life as well. And then people, unfortunately, also, get very fatigued, experience anxiety and depression as well. So those are the impacts of achalasia.
What are the treatments? What can people do if they're suffering with this condition? What can they do?
So, I mean, obviously the first step is to get a diagnosis, and that's already quite difficult because there's low awareness of achalasia, even amongst the medical community. Getting a diagnosis can be complicated and can take quite a long time, and people can get misdiagnosed. In terms of treatment, so there is no cure.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Aidan Phelan was the hairstylist behind David Beckham's iconic mohawk. Earning titles like Men's British Hairdresser of the Year, Aidan collaborated with top photographers including Rankin, Mario Testino and David LaChapelle. Following the pandemic, Aidan has been forced onto a different path and has devoted himself to creating a series of thought-provoking artworks, culminating in a debut 30-piece collection, Reflections of a Broken Mirror, at Grove Gallery in London's Fitzrovia. Aidan joins me now. Hello, Aidan. Welcome to GB News. You may have seen me hesitate there as I said you were forced into this. Were you forced into art, or how did the decision come about to change from hairdressing to creating artworks?
Well, I started off in the art world and the struggling artist syndrome, unable to afford to continue.
Right.
Went into the hairdressing format and within 2 years kind of cracked the safe. So then I found out during COVID, during the war in Ukraine that started a few years before that, and then obviously Brexit, product ranges, salons, academies started crumbling. So I went away 2 years ago. I cycled from New York to LA for a new project. And on that journey, I thought, I'm 52, it's time to change. It's time to go back to my first love. And free speech is a massive part of my life, it always has been, and art is the last form of free speech, I find.
You mentioned in passing that you cycled from New York City to Los Angeles.
Yes.
I think we just have to unpack that a little bit.
So New York to LA, 3,466 miles in 66 days, and it was a very, 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 very difficult process. Something that people thought I was crazy to do, but we end up doing it, and it's going to be a very interesting watch.
This was filmed, it's for a programme?
Yeah.
What channel?
Well, I actually financed the project with somebody else, but we have Netflix very interested in the concept, and recently I've had some really good news back from them, so hopefully we should see that September, October.
Let's turn to your artworks. Give me an introduction. They're about free speech, you say?
Free speech, politics, knife crime, streets of London. I've lived in London. I've lived in St Martin's Lane, which you'll probably know, close to Westminster, for many years, and I've lived in Soho, and I've seen London change over the past 25 years. Mm-hmm. I love this country, by the way, and I love this city, but through extreme weak leadership and probably the worst mayor of London in the last 150 years, the city and the country is going through traumatic times, and all these pieces are about, you know, Churchill, Downing Street. It's about knife crime. It's about society.
We've got a couple of kids in one of your pictures who are wearing knife-proof stab vests. We've got a very small kid who's being sort of attacked by social media. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, there's 30 different pieces. I mean, the girl in the mirror. I mean, social media is a massive part of our lives now, even coming on...
There's the kids in there.
Yeah, there's the two. And this particular one here is regarding a young lady who's looking into the mirror, sort of unhappy, unsure of herself. Am I beautiful enough? Am I good enough? This particular piece is about the new Chancellor of the Exchequer.
We're looking at a masked figure holding
daylight robbery.
The smash box of the Chancellor of the Exchequer, daylight robbery. Yeah. Oh, that takes me back to the Beatles. They complained about tax rates, didn't they?
And so the pieces are done in a very, very colourful way, because normally street art can be lots of black and white, but briefly, I met up recently with a very dear friend of mine who I used to cut their hair prior to art, a former Turner Prize winner. And they said, very interesting background colours. And we came to I said, I've gone for the Portillo effect.
You didn't.
So I've always been a huge fan. I'm not a massive fan of politicians or politics, but the way you dress and the way you talk and speak, I've always been I love the shows you did, the one in Australia, the coastal one. And I'm
very moved. I'm very flattered. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so it's really nice to
Tell me a bit about your method. How do you produce those images?
Well, this particular collection, I do a lot of stuff with palette knife. I do a lot of portrait paintings, but this is a stencil format. So you basically create the image, and then you print it out, and then you stencil out the image. Now, it's a long, long process because you break it down into 5 sections, and then so you cut out one section, then you cut out another section, and then you layer, when you're painting them, you layer the layers on top of each other to create the image. So stencil art, a lot of people think it's a cop-out, it's a quick format of art. It's actually the most time-consuming because it can take 5 to 6 days to cut out the detail of each image. So,
and then does that allow you to reproduce the image?
But that's the great thing about it. Once you've done the original, you can recreate it in different colours by using the same stencil.
And so you create a series, effectively?
I've created a series. So, I mean, there's a lot of... the Sir Winston Churchill's one of my...
So what's happened to poor old Churchill there?
So Churchill...
His statue's been cut in half.
It's been divided, and I'm a huge Winston Churchill fan, a massive Churchill fan. That's why it always upset me when Boris Johnson used to compare himself. But Churchill's been split apart, and it's going back to... I've noticed the last 2 sections of the show, people mentioning Trump. It's interesting that you brought it into every section, and I probably won't go into that, but the reason behind Churchill is he's been divided, and a lot of the country loved Churchill for what he did during the war and how he fought for this country in politics. But a lot of people bring up things that they're not so much...
Yes.
And that's the problem with...
Trying to convert a unifying influence into a dividing influence.
He's a divided character now, and... That's the thing these days. 25 years ago, me and you could have a conversation about something and disagree, walk outside and have a cup of tea together.
Yeah.
Today, if you mention somebody or you don't agree with someone and your political views or your art views or your social views don't match, it's almost you're cancelled. So I have a huge problem with people not being able to talk about individuals or characters or politics or Trump. I mean, the guy went into a meeting last week and was just supposed to badmouth Putin. He was in no position to talk about Putin in a negative way when you're about to go into to create a sort of process of
peacemaking.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward in the future to our cup of tea, and we've had no disagreement today. Aidan Phelan.
Pleasure.
Congratulations. Good luck with your exhibition.
Thank you very much.
Coming up, today is the first Sunday of Lent. Historian Tony McMahon will be here to recall the Mardi Gras celebrations that he's just witnessed in Rio de Janeiro. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
Be nice to escape the grey.
Clear skies, here we come.
As clear as our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there. Low pressure still dominates western parts of the Mediterranean. Outbreaks of showers, heavy rain, some strong winds as well. Temperatures a little below average for the time of year. Through Monday, showers across the west, some longer spells of rain, Spain and Portugal. There, showers across into Italy, temperatures in the mid-teens. But the rest of the dry weather across Greece, across into Turkey as well. Plenty of sunny spells here. And the outlook for is it to improve a little with temperatures rising too.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. For many, it's a fine Sunday out there, but we'll start to see a change in store, rain arriving from the north and turning colder next week. Taking a look at the bigger picture then, we do have this area of low pressure down towards the south. Could just bring in a bit of cloud here, but this is the cold front that will introduce colder air through into Monday. But out there, through much of Sunday, plenty of sunshine on offer. Quite hazy at times across the south or west of England, but Orkney and Shetland will see some some heavier spells of rain, just gradually sinking southwards. Otherwise, as for temperatures, not doing too bad at all. In that sunshine, staying on the mild side for the time of year. We may even get 18, 19, possibly 20 degrees across central parts of England today. So as we go through Sunday evening, heavy spells of rain, especially across parts of Shetland, and this will gradually sink its way southwards. But for the vast majority of Scotland, staying dry into this evening. Likewise for much of Northern Ireland and across much of England as well. We will start seeing some mist and fog patches develop, and across the far south we'll hold on to a bit more cloud through Sunday evening and into the start of Monday. So as we go through Sunday evening and Monday morning, this band of rain across much of northern parts of Scotland will gradually continue to sink its way southwards, perhaps turning a little bit wintry over the hills. Across much of England and Wales, though, we will see a bit more cloud, so it is going to be frost-free out there for most of us, with a strengthening wind coming down from the north later. So as we start Monday morning then, across parts of Scotland, we have this band of rain with a bit of a wintry mix, especially across the hills. That will slowly sink its way southwards into northern parts of England, bring some patchy rain. Elsewhere, generally a cloudier picture. There will be some brighter interludes, but not as mild here. But across the north, that's where it's going to be turning colder, with a brisk northerly wind developing. Bye-bye.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Today is the first Sunday of Lent, and joining me to discuss how Mardi Gras was marked in Rio de Janeiro is the historian Tony McMahon. Tony, you've just been in Rio then, have you?
I have.
Did you go just for Carnival?
I actually was on a cruise going from Buenos Aires to Rio, and I was giving talks on this cruise ship about the Carnival and the history of Carnival. And I arrived in Rio, and it was a scene of mayhem. I'd never actually been to Rio, I'd never been to the Carnival, and I'd never seen anything like it. I mean, the streets were alive with people.
I'm lucky enough, I think I've been to it 3 times. Wow. It is the most extraordinary thing. I was just reflecting, you know, cultural differences. We mark Shrove Tuesday here by making a pancake. I mean, it's almost by definition the flattest thing you can do. And in Rio, what they spend millions on having this enormous party, don't they?
So they have a whole section of the city where they have something called the Sambadrome, which is an arena dedicated to the Carnival. So you get your seat, and for hours, from about 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., you just watch this procession of incredible floats. Nothing like the Notting Hill Carnival. This outpaces the Notting Hill Carnival by several fold. The most incredible float I saw, actually, that night. And by the way, the noise is incredible. Everybody's singing the same song. It's almost hypnotic.
Yes.
This float, which had this huge devil on it, that then rose up with horns and everything. It's just a visual sensation.
And by the way, the energy, I mean, we're watching people dancing at the moment.
Yes.
The people on the floats and the people who are walking the processions alongside the floats dance continuously for hours.
Yes.
I've no idea how they don't drop with exhaustion. Just the most extraordinary sustained energy, isn't it?
And you know, I saw some of them leaving afterwards, the Sambadrome afterwards, and they looked drained. They looked like they'd really danced for their lives. And they are, in a sense, dancing for their lives, because these samba schools are from very poor areas of Rio, and they are competing for a lot of money. So they are dancing their hearts out, but they're also dancing because they hope to win literally millions of dollars.
And think, too, about the effort that goes into these extraordinary costumes. I mean, we're saying that people are dancing, continuously. Some of them are wearing almost nothing, but by contrast, some of them are wearing a lot. And you've got to imagine, what was the temperature when you were there?
Oh, my gosh. It was about 30, 31, 32, but it's the humidity.
Yeah.
It's very humid in Rio. So I don't know. In fact, I seem to remember that person who's on now. And that head actually swivelling around, because there's incredible visuals which kind of draw on African traditions, but also the kind of Native American traditions, the Tupi people, as they were called in Brazil, but also the Portuguese influence as the former colonial power. So you've got this real mixture of Latin, African, Native American going on, and this music that just boom, 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 boom constantly, and this singing and the movement.
Naturally, there's a connection here with the enslaved people. The enslaved people who picked the sugar crop in Madeira for the Portuguese, who picked the sugar crop for the Portuguese in Brazil as well. What about, tell me about the days of the week, as it were, as we move. What was the Monday called?
So in England, the last Monday just gone was called Collop Monday. And if you were a peasant in the Middle Ages, you were expected to get rid of all your meat. I mean, you probably wouldn't have much meat left, because you've just been going through the winter, you've got all this buried meat, salted meat that you've been eating, hoping that you're not going to run out. But whatever you had, you got rid of on Collop Monday. Shrove Tuesday, you got rid of all the dairy products, the milk, the eggs. Right. That's why we have pancakes on Shrove Tuesday. Then Wednesday, Lent starts. You have Ash Wednesday, you put the ash cross. But actually, it's today, the first Sunday of Lent, which used to be called Quadragesima Sunday, much nicer word. This is really when Lent gets underway. You've got to get serious, you start fasting, penance, no joy. Even the monarchy in the Middle Ages, they used to wear black. It was treated as a period of mourning for 40 days.
Quadragesima, in Spanish, Quaresma, all of these words relate to 40.
Yes.
And 40 is the days that Christ spent in the wilderness.
That's right.
Before Holy Week. Extraordinary.
Tempted by Satan, of course.
Tempted by Satan.
Which is why I think Satan features in the Rio Carnival.
The word that was going out of my head there was Carnival.
Yes.
Now, Carnival means goodbye to meat, doesn't it? Carnevale, bye-bye meat. And that's because, recognising Christ's time in the wilderness, meat was not allowed in the diet in that period.
Yes.
And so you had this enormous celebration before this long period in which you weren't allowed to touch meat.
Yeah. So you're basically expected to give up meat, all dairy products, sweeties, anything nice. You basically live on bread, vegetables, bit of fruit, and that's it, basically. So you are down to a very basic diet for 40 days, preparing for the crucifixion of our Lord and his resurrection.
Keep talking, if you would.
I'll keep talking. So basically, as you said, it is about emulating Jesus in the desert, his period of fasting before he began his ministry. And, it was a really grim time, frankly, for people in the Middle Ages to have to give up. Not just that, though, you weren't expected to have fun. You weren't expected to have carnal relations. You talk about carn, you weren't expected to have carnal relations either. And anybody who'd been very, very naughty in the run-up to Lent had to turn up to church holding a torch, a blazing torch, as a kind of shame, a mark of shame today. This is when they did it, to show that they'd been especially naughty during Carnival.
Well, how extraordinary. Now, I encourage you to keep talking there, because I was doing a little bit of a costume change. The mask I'm wearing actually is a Carnival mask from Venice.
Yes.
But I wore it in at the Carnival in Rio.
Yes.
What do you think?
I think it's very fetching. In fact, I did see a few masks like that. I wasn't as courageous as you. I didn't buy one. I did think they had kind of an Aztec headdress, but this was so hot. I thought, oh my God, if I wear that, I'm going to fall over. But no, I think it's very fetching. I think it actually suits you, if you don't mind me saying so.
Would you go again?
Oh yes. I mean, to be honest with you, I think people say it's a once in a lifetime experience, but I think, like you said, it's a 3 times in your lifetime experience, because each year is completely different. They knock out a samba school that didn't do well enough, so you're always getting new ideas coming through. And they spend the whole year preparing for this. This is why it's so incredible.
Tony McMahon, I'm glad you had such a good time. Thank you for coming and talking talking to us about the origins of Carnival and the origins of Lent. Well, thank you indeed. Thanks to all my guests who've joined me today. It's always so good that they give up their Sunday to come into the studio. It's been a pleasure to be with you. I will be back next Sunday, I'm pleased to say. But now, do please stay tuned, because the next programme is The Weekend with Dawn Neeson, and you wouldn't want to miss that. Bye-bye. Have...
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. After a largely fine weekend, it is going to be turning colder as we head into the new working week and generally cloudier for most of us on Monday. So taking a look at the bigger picture then, this is a cold front that will sink its way southwards across Scotland and then later into parts of England, introducing much colder air behind it. But through the rest of Sunday evening and into Monday morning, we have this band of rain across Orkney and Shetland, quite heavy at times, sinking its way southwards. Across much of England and Wales, we'll hold on to a bit more cloud as we go through this evening and overnight, with some murky conditions developing across eastern coast as well. But otherwise, generally staying frost-free for most of us, but turning colder across northern parts of Scotland. So as we start Monday morning then, across parts of Scotland, we'll see this band of rain turning wintry over the hills, but also quite murky across the eastern coast as well, with a lot of fog here. Across Northern Ireland, some bright spells to start Monday morning, and across much of western parts of England as well. A lot of cloud, but mixed in with some brighter interludes to start Monday. So as we go through Monday morning and into the afternoon then, this band of rain that's across parts of Scotland will slowly sink its way southwards, still holding on to some fog across the eastern coast, so murky here. But across much of England and Wales, there will be some brighter interludes, but some showery rain just pushing in to southwestern parts of England as we go through the afternoon. But a contrast in temperatures slightly down across the south compared to recent days, but much colder across northern parts of Scotland, and with a brisk breeze coming down from the north. As we go through Monday evening, we hold on to the cloudy conditions continuing to sink its way southwards, but a colder start across parts of Scotland on Tuesday. And for all of us, temperatures will be falling away closer to average for the time of year. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye for now.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could have £17,777 in tax-free cash to play with this spring. Cash to spend on anything you like. And if that wasn't enough, we're also going to give you not one, but two sought-after designer watches and the latest Mulberry handbag. How would winning that sound? For a chance to win the cash, 2 watches and the designer bag, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that.
When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock on